deportation.
You can't have, we say no to the inferior driver's license. One license for all is the only way. People are not going to come out of the shadows to sign up for a stigmatized inferior license. It's going to undermine the public safety goals that we have to meet.
We want to know what horrible things are that could happen because of this. That's what we want to know.
Yeah, I think we're saying discrimination, racial profiling, and deportation.
So you think that people could, if people apply for a job, they're already going to know their status, right?
Right, when you're entering a building, you show your license with the big scarlet letter. It's going to prejudice people against you. They're going to, think anybody who look and sound foreign are illegals. We just know it's not going to work.
That's what I'm looking for, many examples of where in your daily life, where in people's daily lives is it going to be an impact on them?
Right.
Well, the fact is in all aspects of life, whether it's in an interaction with a police officer. One thing we saw a few weeks ago is parts of the state have threatened, even under the previous policy, the one that we supported, threatened to deport immigrants on the basis of anyone coming forward to obtain a license. This is only going to make for a 10 times worse situation. It's going to exacerbate that type of kind of action, punitive action, enforcement action against our communities in all aspects of life.
And it's not DMV's job to enforce immigration laws. DMV agents should not be asked to go after undocumented immigrants or stigmatize undocumented immigrants. It's not their job. The federal government needs to be more responsible and fix our immigration system so that we don't have 12 million undocumented people in this country. I also ask all the other speakers come up and help us, answer questions. Other questions?
Sorry, any other question about giving license to illegal immigrants about anti-terrorism? So at least that's what they say. So is there, especially with the real ID law, is there a way, do you see a legal way to give driver's license to undocumented immigrants and then still comply with the real ID law?
Yeah, real ID provisions is something that we, first of all, don't have to comply with until a much later date. And then it's a horrible nightmare, disaster. It's what we call fake security law. Real ID is not about security, it's fake security. So we are saying that the governor in New York State should be on the forefront of repealing that kind of a fake security law. So one license for all is something that we can do completely legally, and we have chosen not to do it.
You say that Spitzer's plan for the different tiered licenses would implement Real ID in New York faster than we're required to?
Yes.
What's the time difference in that?
I think we should have been more thoughtful about looking at the security and public safety consequences of complying and non-complying with Real ID. All of that process, none of the discussions that need to take place, and everything was just out the window, and we get this midnight, last minute announcement about Real ID.
So, the Real ID Act, New York had another 6 years before it had to implement the Real ID Act. Not until 2013, at the very minimum, will the federal government begin requiring a Real ID Act compliant driver's licenses for federal purposes. So Spitzer is jumping the gun, but even more so, what he's doing is that he's resurrecting an act that was on the brink of death. 17 states have passed legislation against the Real ID Act. He's going 100% against the national tide. The American Conservative Union, Gun Owners of America, National Organization for Women, the ACLU have all been against the Real ID Act. It is a nonpartisan issue, and the Real ID Act comes from the same administration that brought us the Patriot Act, and will be used, the Real ID Act, to spy on the movements and activities of Americans.
But the Real ID Act is still tied up in court, right? It's still not decided. It
aren't there court challenges against it?
With the state passing the laws against it, isn't that headed for a court battle?
No, because of federalism principles, states are now required to implement the Real ID Act. So states have every right to pass legislation against the Real ID Act and to state that that state will not implement the Real ID Act. So there are no legal battles when it comes to the driver's license provisions of the Real ID Act. The Real ID Act did other things, such as change asylum law and so forth. But regarding the driver's licenses provisions, Governor Spitzer did not have to implement the act, and he does not have to implement the act. He's choosing to do so under state power.
So we could just forget about the whole driver's license aspect of the Real ID Act altogether.
Yes, that's exactly. And seven states have passed binding legislation stating that they will not appropriate money, and they will not implement the Real ID Act.
So this could be solved just by lots of letters to the state legislature for people who don't want the Real ID Act.
Well, that has been happening, and that's what we're asking New Yorkers. We're asking American citizens to say that they are against a national ID card, that they are against the government tracking their movements and activities, and that they're against the Real ID Act.
And we're saying do not use Real ID Act as an excuse to deny immigrants licenses.
Let me add just one more comment, because Real ID Act has a lot of problems, as we all know. It has a tremendous cost is a problem, and it has implementation issues and privacy issues and civil rights issues. But on top of that, one of the real problems is that about a month ago, Governor Spitzer had a press conference in this building. I was there. We applauded his leadership and his courage, because he promised that starting from December of this year, New York State will provide access to driver's licenses regardless of the immigration status, starting from December of this year. Now he flip-flops. He changed his position. Now he's saying that the access to such a discriminatory licenses will not be provided to undocumented immigrants until the implementation of Real ID Act. That is one of the contradictions that our governor is showing to himself and to us.
I was going to ask, how exactly did the governor characterize his position on Real ID Act and on a tiered driver's license system when he stood with him about a month ago? How exactly did he characterize his position then?
Did you see his statement from yesterday?
Yes.
So I think you know. I would say it was just such an obvious case of you give me cover for me to change my mind, right? The governor, this is what the governor is saying to Chertoff. You give me political cover and you give me your stamp of approval on the 3-tier system because I need to change my mind. I need to go back on my word and do this. So if you give me your stamp of approval on this 3-tiered system, then I will give you political cover for Real ID, which I didn't support before. So that is what happened. There is no, I think yesterday they made it try to sound like this agreement somehow made it possible for immigrants to get this 3rd-tier license. Anybody can do a 3-tier system all over the country if they want to. So there's no, am I making sense?
A little bit, because his people had said that they were waiting to decide on Real ID Act and that it's not identifying on a driver's license a person's immigration status. So they're saying that they're not totally contradicting themselves and that they have never really decided on Real ID Act, but you're saying otherwise.
I'm not understanding the question.
Okay, sure.
The original position of the governor at the time of his announcement on driver's licenses was that they were going to continue to wait and see. That was the understanding of advocates, that that's where the governor was. He's completely flip-flopped, as we've established, and now said that it's a 3-tiered system, and for our communities, they will have a badge of inferiority, a scarlet letter on their license. That is not something up until 2 days ago that we were even aware was on the radar. So this is a complete shock to community, to us, to advocates, and it does represent a major turnaround from where the governor was a month ago.
Right. Wait, let me. Sure. When we were talking with the governor on this, there was a conversation on what are the principles that are going to guide his policy. And one of the primary principles that the governor has been speaking about all over the state is to bring undocumented immigrants, to bring nearly 1 million New Yorkers out of the shadows. That has been its main talking point. What this plan does, what a tiered driver's license system does, is that it sends immigrants into the shadows. It creates a scarlet letter on a driver's license of an undocumented immigrant, telling the police, telling the world that they are undocumented. And no undocumented immigrant in their right mind would voluntarily carry a driver's license that states that they are undocumented.